You found your way to Whispers of Crimes, a quiet corner where the shadows of the past are gently told. Here, we speak of real crimes and mysteries, not to shock or scare, but to wonder, to reflect, and maybe to help you fall asleep. So close your eyes, let your thoughts slow down, and come with me into tonight's case. November 2nd, 2007, a quiet Italian town is rocked by the discovery of a brutal crime. A British exchange student is found murdered in her bedroom. Within days, the spotlight falls on her American roommate, and the world is captivated. Was Amanda Knox a cold-blooded killer hiding behind a girl-next-door smile? Or the victim of a deeply flawed investigation and an unforgiving media machine? What really happened that night in Perugia? A tangled web of forensic errors, shifting alibis, and a courtroom battle that would span nearly a decade. This isn't just a murder case, it's a global obsession, a trial by press, and a haunting search for justice. In this episode, we unravel the facts, the myths, and the lasting questions behind the murder of Meredith Kercher and the trial that changed everything. This is the story of Meredith Kercher and Amanda Knox. Chapter 1, A Peaceful Beginning. Perugia, a serene and historic city in the heart of Italy, is known for its cobbled streets, medieval architecture, and vibrant student life. It was here, in 2007, that two young women, Meredith Kercher and Amanda Knox, found themselves far from home, beginning new chapters in their lives. Meredith, a 21-year-old British exchange student, had arrived in Perugia full of excitement for her academic year abroad. She was known for her intelligence, kind nature, and deep commitment to her studies. Her dream was to have a fulfilling career and make the most of her time in Italy. Amanda Knox, an American student from Seattle, had also come to Perugia to study. She was a free spirit, adventurous, and eager to embrace the Italian way of life. She had a bubbly personality and quickly made friends. The two women shared a flat in a house on Via della Pergola. Though their personalities differed, Meredith being quieter and more reserved, and Amanda being lively and outgoing, they both quickly settled into their new lives, experiencing the excitement of living in a foreign country. But in the quiet of this picturesque city, something terrifying was about to unfold. Meredith's tragic death would not only shatter the lives of those close to her, but it would also thrust Amanda Knox into the media spotlight, eventually leading to one of the most controversial and sensationalized trials in modern history. At this point, though, their world was still filled with the promise of youth, friendship, and the discovery of new cultures. No one could have predicted the nightmare that was about to unfold. Chapter 2, Discovery of the Crime. The morning of November 2nd, 2007 began just like any other in Perugia. But that morning, Meredith Kercher's life was brutally ended, and the world was about to be introduced to a shocking and senseless crime. The discovery was made by a friend of Meredith's, who had come by to check on her after she failed to attend a dinner party the night before. What greeted her in Meredith's bedroom was a grisly and violent scene. Meredith's body was lying on the floor, partially clothed, her throat slashed in a brutal attack. She had been sexually assaulted, and the scene suggested a violent struggle. Local police were immediately notified and arrived at the crime scene. They began their investigation, but the early stages of the case would be marred by a series of mistakes. For one, crucial evidence was mishandled. The police failed to secure the crime scene properly, contaminating potential evidence in the process. The media descended on Perugia almost immediately, adding to the confusion surrounding the investigation. As investigators pieced together what had happened that night, suspicion began to turn toward Amanda Knox and her then-boyfriend, Raffaella Sollecito, who had been in the vicinity of the crime scene. Amanda had been questioned by police shortly after the discovery of Meredith's body, and her behavior was seen as unusual. She seemed overly calm in the face of such tragedy, a fact that would be scrutinized throughout the investigation and trial. What followed was a whirlwind of confusion, mistakes, and an increasing media frenzy that would ultimately tarnish any semblance of objectivity. In the eyes of the police and the public, Amanda's behavior raised alarm bells. She was seen as too calm, too cheerful in the face of Meredith's death. This would become one of the key elements that both the police and the media would latch onto as the investigation dragged on. Chapter 3: The Arrest of Amanda Knox and Raffaele Sollecito. Days after Meredith's death, Amanda Knox and Raffaele Sollecito found themselves at the center of a mounting criminal investigation. The authorities, unable to find solid leads, began to focus on Amanda and her relationship with Meredith. Amanda had spent part of the night of the murder at Raffaele's apartment, and their alibis were questioned. The police began to piece together a timeline that seemed to implicate the two of them, particularly after some contradictions in their initial statements. The media frenzy was already in full swing, and sensational headlines began to paint Amanda in an unflattering light. The press, eager for a story, quickly coined her the Foxy Knoxy persona, emphasizing her appearance, her behavior, and any small inconsistency in her testimony. The narrative was set in the public mind. Amanda Knox was a cold-blooded killer who had committed murder with her then-boyfriend. The media's portrayal of Amanda was a major force that influenced public opinion and the police investigation. Raffaele was also arrested on November 6, 2007, and both were charged with the murder of Meredith Kercher. The police had not gathered much hard evidence to link them to the crime, but they argued that there was enough circumstantial evidence to make a case. There was DNA evidence, for example, found on Meredith's clothing, and Raffaele's DNA was discovered on a bra clasp found at the scene. But even this evidence was controversial and flawed. The police had failed to properly collect or preserve crucial forensic materials, leading to questions about the validity of the evidence. Both Amanda and Raffaele maintained their innocence, and the accusations against them only fueled the public's curiosity and judgment. It seemed as though the entire world had made up its mind. They were guilty. The media portrayed Amanda as a deviant, casting her behavior and personality as evidence of her culpability. But as the investigation progressed, it was clear that the case against Amanda and Raffaele was much more complicated than the public was led to believe. Chapter 4: The Trial Begins. In 2009, the trial of Amanda Knox and Raffaele Sollecito began, and it quickly became a spectacle of courtroom drama and media coverage. The prosecution argued that Amanda and Raffaele had killed Meredith in a fit of anger during a botched robbery. They suggested that Amanda, perhaps under the influence of drugs, had committed the murder with Raffaele's help. However, the prosecution's case relied heavily on circumstantial evidence and the assumption that the two were guilty based on their behavior and personality traits. One of the key pieces of evidence presented by the prosecution was the DNA found on Meredith's clothing, which the police claimed linked Amanda and Raffaele to the crime scene. However, there were significant doubts about the handling of the DNA evidence. For example, the bra clasp that contained Raffaele's DNA was found months after the crime, raising questions about how it was handled and whether it had been contaminated. Amanda's behavior during the trial was also under intense scrutiny. Her calm demeanor, her occasional laughter, and her perceived lack of grief were all presented as evidence of her guilt. In the media, she was often painted as a manipulative and deceptive figure. Yet, Amanda consistently maintained her innocence, insisting that she was not involved in Meredith's murder and that she had been at Raffaele's apartment the night of the crime. The defense presented their case by emphasizing the lack of solid evidence linking Amanda and Raphael to the murder. They argued that the case against them was based on unreliable police work, rushed assumptions, and media sensationalism. They questioned the credibility of the evidence and pointed out numerous inconsistencies in the prosecution's case. But with the media's judgment already passed, it was an uphill battle for Amanda and Raphael. Chapter 5. The Conviction and Appeal. On December 5, 2009, the court rendered its verdict. Amanda Knox and Raphael Salicedo were found guilty of the murder of Meredith Kercher. Amanda was sentenced to 26 years in prison, while Raphael received a 25-year sentence. The public, still captivated by the case, was divided. Some believed that justice had been served, while others questioned the validity of the conviction. Was there enough evidence to convict them, or had they become victims of an unjust legal system and the media circus surrounding their trial? The case was far from over, however. Amanda's legal team immediately appealed the decision, arguing that the trial had been flawed from the beginning. They pointed out that the DNA evidence was unreliable, the crime scene had been mishandled, and the police had rushed to judgment. The defense also suggested that the media had unfairly influenced the case, shaping public opinion to the point where it was almost impossible for Amanda to get a fair trial. The appeal process was a long one, and as the years went by, it became clear that the case was more complex than anyone had anticipated. The legal battle continued as new evidence came to light, and the question of Amanda's innocence remained unresolved. Chapter 6. The Exoneration of Amanda Knox and Raphaela Salicedo. In 2011, after nearly 4 years of legal battles, a new court hearing overturned the convictions of Amanda Knox and Raphael Salicedo. The appeal court found that the evidence used to convict them was unreliable and insufficient. The DNA evidence that had been central to the prosecution's case was called into question, with experts suggesting that it had been mishandled and was therefore inadmissible. The ruling was a stunning turn of events. Amanda Knox, who had spent nearly 4 years in an Italian prison, was finally set free. Raphaela Salicedo was also released. For Amanda, it was the end of a long and painful ordeal. She was reunited with her family and friends, but the scars from her time in prison would never fully heal. Raphael, too, faced the difficult task of rebuilding his life after being wrongfully imprisoned. The case sparked an international debate about justice, media influence, and the role of the public in shaping legal outcomes. It also raised questions about the limitations of the legal system and the risks of rushing to judgment based on circumstantial evidence. Despite the exoneration, the case of Meredith Kercher's murder remains unsolved, and questions about who was truly responsible for her death continue to linger. Chapter 7. The Aftermath and Ongoing Controversy. Though Amanda Knox and Raphael Salicedo were acquitted, the case of Meredith Kercher's murder remains a subject of ongoing controversy. The media's portrayal of Amanda, the flawed investigation, and the constant legal battles created a narrative that was difficult to escape. Some people still believe that Amanda and Raphael were involved in Meredith's murder, while others accept the court's verdict and view the case as an example of how a flawed justice system can wrongly convict innocent people. Amanda Knox has since written a memoir about her experience, and she has become an advocate for criminal justice reform. Her story highlights the dangers of media sensationalism, public opinion, and the presumption of guilt in high-profile cases. Raphaela Salicedo, too, has worked to rebuild his life, but the shadow of the trial will forever follow them. The murder of Meredith Kercher remains unsolved, with no one definitively convicted for her death. The case is a haunting reminder of the complexities of the justice system, the dangers of bias, and the lives forever altered by one tragic crime. That's all for tonight's story. Another thread in the web of true crime, quietly unraveling as the night goes on. If you're still with me, thanks for listening. And if sleep has already taken you, may your dreams be peaceful and your mind at ease. I'll be here next time by the fire with another story waiting to be told. Good night, and don't forget to lock your doors.